Financial problems may seem harder to tackle if you feel like you're struggling alone. In this programme, 2 teachers share their financial issues with a panel of experts.
I am not in receipt of the management allowance anymore, and I'm beginning to find now rather a struggle.
Through their stories, you too can gain ideas on how to better manage your finances.
Have you considered perhaps transferring to an interest-free credit card? You can get sort of perhaps 12 to 18 months interest-free.
On the panel are Julian Stanley, Chief Executive of the Teacher Support Network, Sharon Gilbert, a financial advisor to the teaching profession, and Robert Latham, a senior counsellor working for TeacherLine. Prue is a teacher whose debts have grown to unmanageable proportions. She's felt less able to share her problems as her debts have mounted. She was recently given some financial help by a relative, and she now wants to discuss her spending habits in order to avoid further debt in the future.
Thanks, Prue, for coming in today to talk to us. Do you want to tell us something about your circumstances?
I found in my mid-40s that we got ourselves in a real mess financially. That is the difficulty when you are older, you're not a student anymore, you haven't got that excuse, you are supposed to be a pillar of the community, you're a professional, you don't get yourself in that mess, and we just felt totally alone.
Can you give me a bit of an idea of how you got into this sort of situation?
Taking out loans, small loans, and convincing yourself they're only so much a month. We bought a house that needed doing up, and buying a car with car finance that you can't really afford. It didn't take many of those payments plus the mortgage for you to have nothing left after you've been paid, and then you haven't got any money to put fuel in the car, and you're rooting through your handbag trying to find small change so you can give your kid dinner money. And that's embarrassing.
So how long sort of has this situation been going?
I would say that it's been getting worse over about 3 years.
And when did you get to a point where you felt that this was sort of getting out of hand?
About 2 months ago, coming home and finding my husband crying at the kitchen table and just saying, I just don't have any more answers, I don't know what to do about this anymore. In the end, a relative actually lent us some money so that we could pay off some of the debt. And that is the situation today. It's how do you not make the same mistake again?
Counsellor Robert Latham thinks Prue needs to start by looking at her attitude towards money.
You talked about spending behaviours, I can afford that. It's really having to put some steps in before the spending which really look at the difference between what I want and what I need.
What we weren't doing were sensible things like making a shopping list before you go to the supermarket.
There are some simple rules about grocery shopping. Don't go to the supermarket when you're hungry, and these kinds of things, or when you're tired, because you're more likely to not stick to a list.
It's living for the moment and not planning ahead about saving money or anticipating the next thing you're going to have to pay for. And that's what I think that was a big contributor to our situation.
I think there'd be a strong need to work with our money advisor, for example, to actually look at ways in which one might take some of the heat out of the situation.
So how would financial advisor Sharon Gilbert go about tackling Prue's finances?
What we would sort of firstly look at is sort of going through an income and expenditure, looking at priority payments like your mortgage, council tax, water. Have you sort of approached the Building Society bank that you have your mortgage with to see if you could perhaps swap to an interest-only mortgage? It's not something you can do over a long term because obviously you are only paying interest off the mortgage, but that would actually lower your payments.
I'm sorry to be negative, but we are on an interest-only mortgage.
Right.
Would there be scope for you, for example, to downsize Housewife, assuming you could sell a home?
Probably not, because our house would end up being in negative equity because the house prices have dropped since we bought it, and we only live in a terraced house. How much smaller do you get?
Yeah, quite. So no, it's difficult stuff. So in such circumstances, what are the options?
Prue has been given some temporary relief by the loan from her relative. But what are the choices at this stage for people without the possibility of private support?
This is where you get into a position where you do have to make sort of tough choices. There are debt management companies that Citizens Advice Bureau will sort of put you in touch with. Right. They technically take over the debt and you make payments to them. Companies are more likely to make negotiated payments with a debt management company rather than an individual.
Because they're taking over the debt, in effect?
Yes. Bankruptcy is always an option, but obviously as you own your own home, you could actually lose your home as part of the bankruptcy. Citizens Advice Bureau are the best people to sort of advise you on sort of these type of things.
For Prue, the burden of her debts is social as well as financial.
Owning up to having money problems is something that a lot of teachers, you just don't feel safe about saying that, because if the word gets out that you're in trouble, you're not considered to be a professional, upstanding member of the staff.
It's an issue that many people in professional occupations, if you like, are facing more and more, and in some ways perhaps are less able to deal with it because they haven't had to in the past.
And I think it's worth pointing out for you emotionally to be able to say to you that you're not alone, because actually I would say at Teacher Support Network what we've found through the credit crunch and the recession kicking in is that the requests are much greater for support, for financial assistance and for money advice in particular. And there are people who have been through this. Perhaps Robert will give us some ideas about...
So, in Prue's situation, the panel are suggesting that it's a good idea to share problems with others. It's also helpful to stop and think about your attitude to saving and spending. If you're worried about your finances, seek advice from organisations like the Citizens Advice Bureau. Next up, Chairperson Julian Stanley has another teacher's financial problems to discuss with the panel.
Kirsten from Sheffield has been in touch. Kirsten's 31, has been a qualified teacher for 3 years. She's a single parent with a 14-year-old son. Kirsten has very little debt but no savings. However, she has recently missed 2 mortgage payments, and she's very concerned about this and about covering everyday expenses for her and her son. Sharon.
In this sort of circumstance, we would look to do a benefits check for Kirsten. She's a single parent with a child and therefore would be eligible for some sort of child tax credits. So it would be looking at sort of if she's maximising her income through sort of any eligible benefits.
Yes. The debt but no savings element, how does that impact on her?
Difficulties there is as she's missed payments, it'd be quite difficult for her to sort of negotiate a payment holiday or a change in sort of terms for a mortgage. In this circumstance, it may be that she'd be eligible for perhaps a grant from Teacher Support Network to look at sort of helping with some of these arrears to get her back on her feet.
Robert, is this a fairly typical situation now coming through on the telephone lines?
Yeah, it's not uncommon for us to get calls from people in these kinds of circumstances where they're having a sudden blip. I guess from the point of view of the coaching side of the service, I would kind of want to explore what was going on at that time that caused her to miss 2 payments, because it kind of looks as if she's been really managing up till now.
We can only get ourselves out of these situations by understanding what's actually gone on at different levels.
Yeah.
In the recent transition from management allowances to teaching and learning responsibility payments, primary teacher Rita has lost out financially. She wants advice on how to budget for her reduction in earnings each month.
Rita, just for the sort of uninitiated like myself, could you tell us a bit more about how this transition process worked?
The actual ending of the management points, it was a whole nationwide agreement. Okay. When I was told by word of mouth that I would be losing the management allowance, I did immediately begin looking around for other jobs. But given that a lot of other teachers were in the same position as myself, and there were less TLR allowances than there were management, so it was very, very much, just a few jobs with a lot of people chasing them.
These changes are really part of the broader workforce agreement that went through, with some unions agreeing to it, some not. But nonetheless, the impact for you is you've got less money in your pocket.
Yeah. Since January, I've been £200 a month down on my money, which I'm beginning to find now rather a struggle.
Financial advisor Sharon Gilbert wants to know how Rita has been managing her reduction in income.
So what sort of steps have you sort of looked at to be able to try and sort of manage your money sort of a bit easier now?
Right, well, what I've done, very basic things like cutting my Sky television package. I've cut down on things like clothes shopping, food shopping. I've cut down on that.
What sort of debt you've got at the moment? Sort of, have you got credit cards and what sort of?
Yeah, I've actually got a credit card and a store card. And what I've done to economise, I've actually shredded both of them.
Have you considered perhaps transferring to an interest-free credit card? You can sort of do a balance transfer. Most credit card companies offer this now, and you can get sort of perhaps 12 to 18 months interest-free on the balance transfer.
I'll definitely look into that. That's a really good idea.
Other things are sort of like looking at utilities providers, and again shopping around trying to find best deals for things like that. Again, it may only be a small saving, but if you do that on your electric, your gas, your water, telephone bills, things like that, it all adds up.
Councillor Robert Latham wants to know how the reduction in earnings is affecting Rita socially.
Rita, you talked a bit about the financial implications of these changes, but how has this impacted on you and your family and the way you see your world at the moment?
I've still got my children back at home with me, and obviously I'm a little bit more stressed out at home.
And can tell me a bit about your children.
My daughter's 29, she moved back home last year. My son, who is 28, he moved back home about 3 years ago.
Do they contribute
They
something?
They do contribute something, yes. But my daughter's at the moment, she's working on quite a low-paid office job, and my son's quite low-paid income as well. So really, they can't put any more than they already are towards the upkeep.
Have they explored the possibility of any kind of benefits?
Rita's children might be eligible for benefits that could contribute towards the household.
They may be eligible for sort of tax credits, depending on sort of what sort of income bracket they're earning, but that would sort of be a top-up in addition to their wages.
I think with them still living at home, though, we've not really kind of gone down that road.
Depending on their salary, they may be able to sort of claim the tax credit.
In their own right?
In their own right, yes. Yes, because they are sort of not financially dependent and they are over 18.
Well, because we've never really explored that avenue, so
Yeah.
that's something for me to think about then.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the things that we do offer teachers is an opportunity to do a benefits check where we can help them look at the possibilities that they may be eligible to apply. We're not in a position to say, yes, you can get this, but we could certainly run through the mechanisms for looking at what opportunities there may be for you to apply.
Yeah.
So, in Rita's situation, the panel suggests transferring credit card debts to accounts offering 0% interest. They also recommend shopping around for deals from utility providers. Family members with low earnings could look into benefits like working tax credits to supplement their income. The advice given in this programme is aimed at the individuals featured, so do consider seeking your own financial advice if you're faced with similar problems. For more information, contact the Teacher Support Network or visit the Teachers TV website.